Good afternoon. Let me try that again. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Maybe one more time. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
For those of you I haven't had the chance to meet, my name is David Porter. I'm the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Haas. On behalf of Dean Ann Harrison, who can't be here today because she's traveling, I'd like to invite you all to welcome you all to today's Dean Speaker Series, co-sponsored by our student club, Q at Haas. Yeah, woo is right. Okay, so before we get started, I'm really excited to hear about today's talk, and not just because it's an opportunity to hear an exceptional leader with an interesting and diverse background, but it also allows us to reemphasize a point that I made, that some of you all may have heard during orientation, about Haas's commitment to diversity, and the fact that I believe that it's part of our responsibility as a top business school in the world to train and develop leaders who are going to be able to be effective in an increasingly diverse workforce. And so in the spirit of that, we have today's discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Kara Hammer, who is the VP of Coming Out Week, and she's also in MBA 20. Kara?
Thank you, Dr. Porter. I'm Kara Hammer, again, VP of Coming Out Week for Q at Haas. And we are having this event now because we are kicking off our Coming Out Week events next week, September 23rd through September 26th. You've probably all seen my Slack messages about that. Please sign up for events. Coming Out Week is a way for the LGBT community to both celebrate and reflect on our journeys and our communities and set an important tone for the Haas experience by continuing to form meaningful relationships and sharing our whole selves. We invite and encourage all Haasies to attend our events and to learn from lived experiences about how to better lift up and support each other. Coming Out Week is an incredible and unique opportunity to celebrate our diversity and come together as a Haas community. If you'd like to participate or attend any events, please join Q at Haas for free on-campus groups and register for those events. Now I'm excited to introduce Arlan Hamilton, founder and managing partner of Backstage Capital, a venture capital firm dedicated to minimizing funding disparities in tech by investing in high-potential founders who are people of color, women, and/or LGBT. Arlan made history by making the cover of Fast Company magazine as the first Black woman who is neither an entertainer or athlete.
That's right. That's not true.
She's also been featured in Forbes, Fortune, and the Wall Street Journal. Arlan entered the venture investing world from an unconventional path. Before launching Backstage Capital, she authored the groundbreaking blog, Your Daily Lesbian Moment, which grew to a monthly readership of 50,000 fans worldwide. She founded and published the internationally distributed indie magazine Interlude and was also a live music production professional. Leading today's conversation with Arlan is Adair Morse, Associate Professor of Finance and a Fellow at the Berkeley Center for Law and Business. She teaches new venture finance, global entrepreneurial finance, and private equity. She was the 2019 full-time MBA faculty recipient of the Chait Award for Excellence in Teaching, and her research covers the areas of household finance, impact investing, entrepreneurship, corruption, and asset management. We're so fortunate to have an expert in the industry and grateful for her participation in today's event. Please join me in welcoming Arlan Hamilton and Adair Morse.
I guess I'm up. Is this on? Yes. All right, good. Thank you all for coming, and Arlan, thank you for coming to chat with us all. So as the moderator here, I just want to say, I think the students in Haas, that they really care as we have this conversation about the leadership example and the disruptive stories that you have achieved in your lifetime. And so we'd like to hear a little bit about your personal story. And then, if you don't mind, we're going to delve into talking a little bit about the founders. A lot of Haas MBAs and others are entrepreneurs, and the frictions that we all face and as well as how do we transform this industry in the innovative sector. So that's kind of our agenda, and that's where we're going to go. So let's get it going, and let's hear about how you got here, because your personal story is just something we all can take inspiration from.
Okay, great. Can I just ask how many people are have companies or want to have companies, so I can understand the room? Cool. And then how many people, is there anyone who wants to be an investor or, okay. And anyone who's thinking about both? Okay, cool, thank you. It helps.
Okay, so what inspired you to go from your background to getting into VC, right?
Yeah, I mean, don't all touring professionals who are homeless start venture capital funds?
That's, yeah.
I mean, it's a long, winding story and road, but essentially, I found myself at like 31 or 32 a few years ago. I'm 38 now. And I had, when I was 10 years prior, I had started working on, as an indie tour manager, just kind of found my way there, which is a whole other story. And years later, had worked my way to a point where I was working on these tours that I was actually really excited about for different artists that were more well-known. And at the same time, though, I had never really figured out this whole making money thing or being able to pay rent on time thing. It was just so foreign to me to be stable. And that has a lot to do with growing up. It also has to do with just what I would go on to understand, which is this kind of entrepreneurial vibe. It's you have friends who are artists, or you're maybe an artist yourself, and artists, they can wake up they can have hours that are 10 p.m. to 6 in the morning, and they're just considered, oh, that's what they do, that's their thing. And I think there's also that when you're a founder, an entrepreneur, you also kind of go to a beat of a different drummer too. But if you're not around a lot of those, you sometimes feel like you're isolated and you don't know what it is. So I honestly feel like it was my second coming out, was to find out, oh, I'm a founder. Oh, that's why I don't have insurance. Okay, cool, all right. All right. So that happened at that point, because I had started all these companies and done all these things that were like mad scientist things, but I never really knew what it was. And when I discovered Silicon Valley, which is how that happened, this come from afar, including, I think, listening to audio recordings of these classes at this school, years and years ago. I loved it because it felt like, okay, the things that I thought were failures are actually just experience. That's great. Reframing. And the things that, that I dream about are not that far off or not that crazy. And this can be actually a way of life. And that's what I really started getting into, just learning everything I could about startups and the world and that surrounds it. And that's also then, of course, when I was confronted, because this was 6-7 years ago, confronted with, oh, wow, there are not that many people who look like me who are getting to be a part of this. And I put my personal desire to start a company on hold after it became pretty clear that there was a bigger mountain to climb. And so that's where I started the interest.
And as we sit here, the students here have a lot of advantages vis-a-vis where you were coming from, but still, it's a club out there.
Yeah.
And still, you graduate with a Berkeley MBA. It's hard to break into that club, much less without a Berkeley MBA. How did you get in? How did you get the club to accept you to be a venture capitalist?
I showed up. I mean, I showed up to, both literally and figuratively. I don't want to encourage people to break boundaries or do things like that, because that's not what I'm talking about. It was more like a little bit of ignorance, and I'm supposed to have as much share in this world as anyone else. I may not have the fancy car that gets me there.
Okay, but the world doesn't work that way, no?
Well, it does when the world works that way inside here. Yeah, I mean, it's yes, there are boundaries, and I mean, also, grew up watching a woman my mother, who grew up in Jackson, Mississippi in the 50s and 60s, and who had my whole life taught me I could do anything I wanted to do as long as I did no harm. She gave me the confidence of a white man. She really did. I mean, that's what it boils down to. And so I was like, well, this is really interesting. We're not really reflected and represented in this world. What a great opportunity to change that, because, I've been playing Monopoly since I was 5. I love Richard Branson since I was 13. To me, it was just like, this is my calling. I'm supposed to make a lot of money, and it doesn't matter how long that takes. I'm not like greedy. I'm not trying to get there immediately. But that's my path, and I'm supposed to make. If I saw someone in the middle of the road and I saw a car coming that they didn't see, I'd try to help them get out of the way of that car. So it was a drive.
Okay, so you have this drive, you have this dream.
Yeah.
How did you make Backstage Capital come to fruition?
Because you can have drive and a dream and all of that, and you're just driving and asleep.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you
got people to give you money.
Yeah,
you found founders that would come to your doorstep.
Well, the founders were already there. That was a big part of it. I wasn't trying to create something that didn't already exist. The founders were already working on the things, and that was the market already. I understood where I need to go. And I just started making myself available to them, and anything that I saw that was interesting, I would get in touch with the person as a founder, and I'd say, hey, can I help you with like PR? Can I help you with this project? Do you have one project that I need? Now, on the side, maybe 10% of those conversations were like, I am looking for work as well because I'm broke. But most of it was, I knew I had to lay I didn't know what this would become, but I knew I had to lay a foundation of value first, because that's just what I knew to be true about what you do with anything. Like, the quality was always important to me. So I had these founders who trusted me and who kind of came to me with things, and they started asking me, okay, now we're looking for investment money. Can you help us find someone? And I'd be like, I'm in Pearland, Texas at the time. I have my inflatable bed on the floor, and I was using a bar stool to hold the little tiny TV I got from CVS. That was my room. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to find you $100,000. But if that's the challenge at hand, let's see. Let me see what I can do. And so I started thinking through all the people I'd met, and most of them didn't have any money either. But I started thinking like the people they may know, and then a few people. Like, as I was helping people, that really does work, by the way. Like, if you help people, it comes back to you. As I was doing that, just kind of naturally, certain people would kind of write to me, and then people started asking me if I knew any great founders, because they wanted to invest, and it became this whole thing because I was already working towards it. I had already started executing. And so a lot of opportunities started happening that was not directly coming to me. So that started happening, started making all these connections. And even then, the people who are anything but white male, for the most part, were being no, I don't want that meeting. I don't want that. I don't like that product. I don't understand the market there. I don't get the market. And then just, and there's this story I'll repeat because I think is ridiculous enough to repeat. There was a company that was led by a black woman from the South, and it was a new way to kind of create the microphones within cell phones. And so they were going to also take that same technology and put it into hearing aids eventually. It was going to be this kind of step. And so I multiple times from the deck, and the only thing I could tell was that they saw the team page. They said, these investors said, I don't understand the market. So I'd say to them, after a while, I was like, okay, so the market is like people who can hear, and also people who cannot hear.
And this tone approach works.
Yeah. I mean, I was just keeping it real, and it was so ridiculous being able to be kind of in this place where I could see all these different data points come in. Like I could see the different people, the excuses they were making about the same thing, and I could see those same people saying yes to the interview with the person who had like a paperclip that could spin forever. Which again, is not, I'm not downing that because that'd be awesome. I would love to see the paperclip that can just spin forever. That'd be sweet. But you know, that's a Spencer's gift situation, and not changing the way people hear.
Okay.
Right.
So I'm going to dig in now to
Yeah,
the here
please.
and not here.
Please do.
These are real frictions, right?
Yeah.
It's a fun story, but there's some reality.
Yeah.
That when you show up at some of these pitchings, to raise capital, if you look different, if you act different, if you're not conforming in all sorts of ways, that you've got a different hurdle to get over than other folks.
Yeah, a lot of times that's the case.
So, gosh, we could talk for a long time, but what do we do? How do we find these people? How do you identify the frictions? How do we make progress on the frictions? Let's start out with how do we find all these people that are facing those frictions? So that how do you find them?
Well, we've started. We're about 6,000 companies in at this point in the last 4 or 5 years alone, and they're everywhere. They're starting companies with or without us, and with or without venture, and they exist. And a lot of what we do at Backstage Capital. And my investment partner, Christy's here, and my apprentice, Chacho's here. So please raise your hands. Say hi to them. There's like a little baby there, too, but I don't know if the baby has a ticket. We've already started. So a lot of what we do at Backstage is in sourcing them, and it started out where like it was just like me looking for companies, and then they would, a company would like that deal, and they would kind of make an intro. And then it got to the point where there was so much inbound that we set up all sorts of processes like applications, and now we see we saw 1,900 applications in 5 weeks to our accelerator last year that we started. In 5 weeks, and I would say 99.9% were underrepresented, underestimated founders. So it's a lot of, when I was thinking about doing this in 2013, 14, my question to myself was, what if there was someone that every black founder, for instance, would call when they were looking for funding? That, what I understood about venture capital and my research was that would be really cool because deal flow is supposed to be king. And now it's almost like that's what we've manifested in this.
Ooh, so why aren't there more venture capital firms that are focusing on this segment of the population?
Yeah.
Venture capital, I actually believe there's a lot of capital, and the capital will go to make money. Mm-hmm. Are they so blinded that they can't see that they can make money?
I mean, there's a ton of stuff. There are other funds, obviously, that do what we do, both before us and after us. There's Impact America, there's Harlem Capital, there's Cross Culture, which does a similar kind of vibe. Plenty of funds that do it. A lot of them are on the sub 100. I mean, most of them and all of them are on the sub 100 million in a world where two guys, who fell out of bed that morning can raise a $200 million fund and then go sexually harass someone with that money. But most of those funds are really small. And I think, so it's like venture is a very slow moving dinosaur.
Monolith.
Yeah, it is. And so the problem is that we look at today and we say, oh, we've had 130 companies invested in, and everybody talks about diversity. And I'm sure everybody in this room kind of, as much as your academic life, for the most part, you're used to hearing about it as if it's just everyday thing. But we weren't talking about it a few years ago. It was a secret, and it was a shame that was the case. And so now that the VCs, which are not really, they're not really in charge. The LPs are in charge. The limited partners who invest in funds are in charge. Now that they're starting to see the sea change, that's what the last 5 to 10 years had to be to get them to now see it. Okay, and now you hear like LPs are like finally reaching out to their fund-to-fund managers or their funds and saying, where's the diversity? Now you're going to see that, but it's going to be this thing where they're going to have to see some big results first before everybody just throws money at it. And when that happens, it will happen. You'll see that in the next 2 years. You'll see in the next 18 months. You'll see some really big exits or a big move. Something will happen. And then there'll be a ton of money that follows it, and because it's trendy. And I guarantee you, most of that money will be captured by white men. Somehow they'll find a way, just like they found it. And I love you, white men. But they found a way to do it with opportunity zones. They'll do it again. And we are kind of, again, left out to the sides. And then it'll happen to be this flurry, and then it will dry up again. But in the meantime, in that tornado of activity, whatever that is, if you call it 18 months to 36 months, where it's just hyperactive, that's when a lot of things can happen that are sustainable for decades when it comes to the quote-unquote right people having the purse strings. And that includes like policy, and that includes the election's going to be pretty important there because it's, obviously it's going to be important for so many reasons, but it's going to be really important when it comes to how whoever goes into office, who is not Trump, decides to spend their money towards that. So I just think the short version of that answer is it takes a lot of time to change the minds, and it won't be the hearts of these LPs, and they have to see it for a long time. They have to see the big burst of change, they react to it, and by the time you see it, it's over.
So I want to ask two things specifically. So if I'm embarking on my career now, and I want to be a part of that change in the VC impact angel innovation finance ecosystem, how do I do it? And then I want to flip that and say, now I'm an entrepreneur, and what do I need to do to overcome the status that I'm fighting as an underrepresented diversity of some sort?
They kind of go hand in hand with my answer. My true answer is, as a venture capitalist, my true answer is do everything you possibly can to become an angel investor. Don't, in my opinion, do not aspire to be a venture capitalist. Aspire to be an angel investor. And
because
do
it's
so.
more captured.
There's more control of where your dollars go, and you can make change into their strength in numbers.
But don't we need to change the VCs? Don't we need, over time, people like you moving into the mainstream VCs? You can go work for Kleiner Perkins.
Yeah, that's what we're working on. Well, you'll never catch me at Kleiner Perkins, but that's what a lot of us are doing. That's what I'm doing by waving my arms and being vocal, and a lot of people are doing that. And a lot of people, they just truly, it's not about necessarily impact or diversity. It's like, I am a black person. I also want to be a venture capitalist. Is that cool? Can I just do that? And I love that too. And they're going to be people, but you have to think about like venture capital is like, I know I make it look fun and cool, but it's boring. It's a boring kind of thing. And I think there's like multiple tracks that have to happen at once. One of them is, yes, you have to have these change makers and have to be as kind of wacky as I am, coming in and just turning everything on its head and getting that attention so that there are these not only seed funds, but then the next stage funds and the next stage funds, and there's real capital behind it. All the work that I'm doing, all of this stuff that people kind of think is, they take a little bit of it and they don't really take it seriously. You're going to see the results of that in 2 or 3 years, because they're going to be us or whomever. We're going to have $200, $300, $500 million funds. It's going to be boring again. It's going to be like, oh, that's just, you're no longer the underdog. You're just part of the system now. So that's going to be a play. But I think people in this room, honestly, and I mean it with all my heart, I became a venture capitalist to become an angel investor. I didn't have any money. I wanted to make a big change and catalyze a lot of people, and that's what we're able to do at Backstage right now. But I envy angel investors, people who have their own power. And I think that the future really relies on them coming together, because I know there is an answer where I say, this is how you kind of go in and convince the current guard. Sure, we can talk about that too. But my preference if I had to kind of create the future for you that I see, it is everybody in this room just kind of like realizing that they don't have to get into that conveyor belt and like what they see on TV or what they read about or hear about. It doesn't have to necessarily be the route that they take.
Switching to the founder perspective.
Yes.
As you saw, a lot of the people here
Yes.
are founders or about to be founders, and will face frictions.
Yes.
I have some pointed questions on that, but first, can you give an example of what sometimes it's hard to see the frictions. Can you give an example of a founder that had those frictions that you found, and it was just like it was clear that it was the frictions and not the founder?
I mean, like that story I told about the hearing thing. I mean, the woman is a professor who is an adjunct professor to some of the students who would be able to get funding.
So
that's just, to me, is one of the clearest that I've ever seen.
So it was the investors not being able to hear because all they could do was see.
Really, I mean, I saw it with my own eyes, so I'm not playing a race card or anything. I sent this deck out to multiple people, from angel investors to institutional investors. They were all white men, because that's who I knew at the time who had money. And I sent the same kind of time frame. I sent out a deck that was for something that did not exist yet. It did not exist. It was not a product. It was an idea on a deck. And time after time, those same investors said, yes, I will take this call. And the difference that I saw, this thing over here, having grant money, having been tested, having been proven, being in market, and this one not, was that this was two young, strapping white men, and maybe a cooler looking deck, and this was not.
Okay. Hard to get over that, right?
That's why I didn't.
Okay. Fair enough, but at some point, when I'm starting my business, I'm going to pitch to regular VCs.
Yes.
I may come to
What's regular?
white male.
That
is regular.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
Okay. Are you going to tell me not to? Are you going to tell me that I should pitch differently than I would naturally pitch?
not at all. I'm going to tell you, go in and pitch. I'm going to say pitch to every investor. I'm going to say, please don't call them regular, because then you're calling me abnormal, and I'm not, and you're not.
Okay, fair enough. Criticism taken.
Yes, and that it's we dance around the word traditional investor, and I like when it comes out of my mouth, I'm like, what does traditional mean?
Yeah, I'm partially from Mississippi. Yeah. Traditional's not so good.
Yeah,
Regular's better.
Exactly, but regular is to
it's
say
bad.
that something is
totally.
abnormal.
Criticism well taken.
Yeah,
yes.
so I would say that. I would say absolutely. I don't think, and this is, I'm more of an optimist than I may seem, but I do not think that there are a bunch of VCs right now sitting at their desk saying, who can I discriminate against? Bring them in. I think for the most part, except for these kind of bad actors and bad eggs, there are people who just have a gig. And they're just wanting to invest in some great things, and then they have these different kind of barriers blocking them and whatever, and some of them are... there's all types of personalities. So I would say go in as an optimist. Go in as an optimist. Go in, you can also be realistic when you do and understand the stats. And I would never, this is where the nuance comes in, because I know a lot of black and brown investors who do not agree with me. But I would say, do not change who you are to walk in and code switch and have these conversations with the investor. And I said that just because that's been my experience. If I code switched, I probably would not have Backstage.
Okay, so I'm not sure if I'm supposed to
You can say
argue
whatever.
with
We can
my
argue.
job here today, but
Please.
So I see 150 of these folks every year in my class.
Yes.
And a good number of them come to office hours and are underselling their background, and a lot of those people that are underselling their background are women.
Yeah. That's
other types, right? That are we get other underrepresented groups.
Yeah.
And the advice you're saying is be yourself.
Yes.
The game calls for me selling myself strongly in what I've done, and so I try to coach the students on, here's how the game is played if you want to play the game.
Yeah.
You're saying don't play the game.
That's not what I said.
Okay.
I didn't say don't play the game. I said, what I'm saying is absolutely know the rules. The reason I got here and was able to make the decisions I was able to make, for better or for worse, is because I learned every rule possible. I knew the game better than anybody else who was playing it, or as well as anybody else who was playing it. And then I was able to make the decisions based on what I wanted to do as myself. So what you're teaching people is the game. So I wholeheartedly support that. I'm saying when you say be yourself or not, what first comes to mind is like your integrity. What you're willing to give up or to concede to or play this different game. That's not something that I think you have to do, because you're going in to talk to investors that you hopefully will have a relationship with for 7 to 10 years, something to that effect, maybe more if you have multiple companies. Why would you go in and completely, you're going to have to keep this facade up for the rest of your life just to talk to them. You're going to have to say yes to something that you normally wouldn't have said yes to because you want that check. But what happens when that money's gone?
No, I think there's a fine line here, and I'm glad we're talking about it, because the what you put on that pitch deck and what you say about your history and where you think this market is, there's two approaches, right? My approach and the way I was raised is you always undersell it or modest about everything. And that doesn't play well when you're trying to raise capital for your startup. And so that's just my cultural and my gender and my identity. But sometimes when I'm teaching too, but when I'm out there, right, trying to raise money, I understand the rules of the game that are being played in the investment community, and I need to put on a different hat. And I think it's hard for people from different cultural backgrounds and different perspectives to understand that that different hat is not being themselves, right? It's just here I'm in this role at this moment, but I'm not being disrespectful to myself of who I am. And I think that's a fine line.
I don't know that we're saying too different of a thing, but we're saying enough of a different thing that I just go back to my own experience, and I just would not have gotten this far if I had played a role, whatever that meant. I would not have gotten that far. I also think that your way is how a lot of people are going to get far. So my takeaway is learn both.
Yeah.
Tax. Learn what the difference is about both.
And you have to make a choice.
And then make a choice.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. All right, we need to open it up to Q&A.
Oh, okay.
Which is a lot more fun than talking to me.
No, it's all good. You're. That's right. So
we have microphones on the side. And,
if you want to ask a question, you can come to the microphones, or you can leave. One of the two.
Yes, please go over to the microphone, because we can talk about some more poignant things. Or
anytime there's like silence here, I will sing. So you weigh that.
Please, thank you.
Hi, thank you for sharing the story with us. So I have a question.
Yes.
So in your scenario, you have somewhat basis to, let's say, like form a VC. So my question is, sometimes you need some kind of like is there something that you can have, like a title, be it anything that can get you to be in that crowd of like whatever, to get basically get you in a room that you want to be in. Let's say, like if you want to get to like a ML or like machine learning conference, and then you say you're doing ML research at Berkeley or MIT, and that will get you to the conference. So that's a name tag. So what do you have to like get you to the room that you want to be in?
Are you literally asking like how to lie to get yourself into a room? Because if you are, that's cool. I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
I'm not.
Because that's cool. I'm like, yeah, you could teach me that. So I don't think I understand the exact question.
Like what resources you need to get, or like what basically like is there any like introduction that you can have to like break you into the VC world? Or let's say in this scenario, like Berkeley MBA is very good, but it may or may not be enough to get you into like any VC event that you want to be in, right?
So you're just talking about event to start?
Not just event, but just like the whole
I think
network, the crowd, the right crowd.
Yeah.
If I
basically.
can expand a little bit on that, networking sometimes is hard, right?
Yeah.
We're in this networking world,
Yeah.
and some people just have all the networks and it comes easy,
Yeah.
and then sometimes it's not. And so
Yeah.
how do you exploit
I didn't have a network here. I learned how to network early, like have a network, and that's just been natural to me, but I didn't have one here in order to get into VC. And so there's a combination, there's a few things maybe, the first thing is knowing the math and the odds, knowing how much competition there is and how many actual open positions there are in VC, and being realistic about that before you start anything. So just kind of knowing the odds, and if you say to yourself, I'm going to be that outlier, I'm going to be the one that breaks through, cool, that's how you start. But just knowing that and knowing that's what you want to face. I think doing things like practical things, like volunteering to work the front kind of check-in desk at different conferences that you want to go to, and usually when you do that, they give you like an hour or one session that you get to go see and get a break and go see it. I've done that before in other industries where I couldn't afford the ticket to get in, or I didn't know exactly how to get in, and I would actually just ask, hey, can I volunteer here for the day or and they have a lot of that's a really good way of doing it. And then when you're there, you actually get to see the names of everybody who's attending. So it's actually a really cool hack in that way. Other ways that I did it at a physical event is that I just really I studied the person that I was trying to get in touch with, and I would write to them very short, like start writing shorter than you are now, cut every email in half, starting today, please. But write that first sentence or two is something like, somebody wants to get my attention, they'll start it off by saying, hey, did you see yesterday's episode of General Hospital? And they probably don't even watch General Hospital, but they know I do, so they just have that one little thing of, they made that little extra effort to understand. And I think somebody got Brad Fell's attention by talking to him about running races, because he likes to run, but I'm sure thousands do that now. But it's like taking time and speaking to the people, and then really important is that if you're in the room, if you get in the room, you don't necessarily focus on the person like me who's talking a lot. You focus on the people who maybe came with that person. The people who are sitting to the side or sitting to the back, who they came in with or they're leaving with, or who they pointed out, and you think about the odds again of, they work at the same place, or they're kin to them or something like that. This person gets X amount of intros and pitches. This person may get a fraction of that. What are my odds here? And just kind of be smart about it. That's what I do too, kind of think about who's in their orbit.
Let's flip-flop and go back and forth, please.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much for being here. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your own personal growth curve in learning VC and going from not being in finance to running such a successful VC. Did someone take you under their wing at any point? Like, what was some of that middle story there?
Yeah, it was a lot of self-teaching at the beginning. Like I kind of describe this almost every time I speak, and I don't think people really get what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, I was obsessive. I was every waking moment reading and learning and talking to someone or absorbing that from some way the years leading up to it. If I wasn't, meeting with someone, I was looking at a video or learning, and then keeping myself really up to date with current events was really important, and still do that today. So a lot of it came from that, truly. I said that I put myself through an MBA program, and I think that, and it's the authors that were very helpful in that case. And then Absolutely. We have almost 200 investors across our small amount of, we have less than about $10 million raised total. It's the small assets under management, but these are like angel investors and different people put money in. So you have 200 people, anywhere from people that you may have not heard of to a Mark Andreessen as an investor in our fund. And so along the way, you definitely get these kind of nuggets of great information. And it's like, finding different ways to surround yourself with people who I don't subscribe to, like going to find the mentor thing. That doesn't really work for me. But like finding, everybody has their reason in your life, like their reason in their season in your life. And so finding, whether it's a sentence someone says that just blows your mind. I can think of someone this year who just gave me one sentence. It changed the way I thought about our business completely. It just blew my mind. And there's someone who might be there for 2 years and their consistency helps. Now, when it comes to like me going in and talking to other venture capitalists, to LPs, to press, to other founders, et cetera, I found myself having to, as a steep learning curve, had to learn a lot. I didn't go to college, and there's like fundamental things I didn't know. I still don't think I've captured the spreadsheet. I don't think I'm good at that. But what I did was surrounded myself with people at Backstage who are really great at those things. And somewhere around 2 years or so ago, I just had a word with myself, and I said, you know what? Your role, and I said it to myself, like your role isn't to learn everything and to know everything. Your role is to be really, really good at certain things and drive this as far as you can. Drive it as far as you can. So I kind of forgave myself a little bit for not knowing everything.
Thank you.
Hey, my name is Yanel. Great, thanks so much for being here. So obviously you're a thought leader in this space. Many of us, I'm sure, are here because we're inspired by your story.
Thank you.
Who are the people that you look up to? Who are your thought leaders? What are some of the books you're reading or people you're learning from?
Yeah. So, Oprah, and I'm not kidding, like Oprah all day. If you kids don't know Oprah, get into some Oprah. So she just, since I was in my teenage years, she's been an inspiration, and people kind of forget what she's done. She's the reason we have so many things that we have right now, including our former president. In my opinion, this is my opinion, there's a lot there. So I've always just looked at Richard Branson and just like dug what he's up to. And then there's like people like Janet Jackson is she's not a VC, but she has this incredible business acumen that doesn't really get spoken about. But at one point she had the largest record deal of any woman in the world in 1993, and kind of nobody really talked about it, but that's pretty big, and has been able to reinvent herself over and over again. So it's people like that. Ani DeFranco was one as well when it came to her business acumen as well. And then there's people like one of the coolest things is that we have 130 or so companies, so about 250 founders in our portfolio. So I'm constantly like in awe of these different founders doing things. Like every single day, I'll see something, and I'll just like every day see something that inspires me and find great inspiration there. And then what's really cool is like just like how venture is getting mixed up a little bit, like you're now seeing. Just a few years later, you're now seeing these business books by women of color that are coming out, and like the memo just came out, and then Double Down just came out, and then I have a book that comes out next year, and there's all these. So all of those people who kind of found their way to having a book inspire me as well.
Thank you.
Please.
Hello.
Hey.
I'm kind of one of those people on a similar path of piecemealing an MBA from like Google.
Yeah, there you go.
And I'm one question. I'm curious, what is the sentence that blew your mind? I think that's a cool question to ask. And then another is, I listened to your episode on your first million about Don Dixon.
Yes, that's
And
a podcast that I host.
It's amazing.
Your first million.
And I really appreciated what happened, like her journey and what happened for her. And I'm curious about your thoughts on the future of angel investing for everyday people, and like what that's going to look like, as we've been seeing a lot of disruption in the financial industry as well.
The sentence I won't share because it's kind of inside information for our company, but it was just a way of unlocking something that had been bothering me for a while, and he just saw it in a different way. And it just kind of opened up the door for us. So I'm sorry, I can't say more. The angel stuff, as you saw earlier, I'm really excited about angel investors, and that's what I mean. I mean, it's a mixture of things. It's angel investors in the more traditional sense, where they're making investments out of their family office or themselves, and they're looking at things one by one, and they're making these larger bets. But it's also crowd equity funding. It's also eventually, years and years from now, something on the blockchain. It won't happen soon, but it'll happen. And I just think there's this whole untapped thing that no one has really tapped into very well yet, and I think it's starting. There's a woman named Macy Peterson who's in our portfolio. She's a Black woman, and she started a series of speaking events and blogs and where she's getting Black women who didn't know that they were accredited investors, basically. So you're accredited if you make $200,000 a year, or $300,000 with your spouse, or have $1 million in assets, not including your main home, et cetera. But a lot of people fall into that category. Like you may work at Google, or you may work at wherever, and you fall into that category and don't know it. And so what she's doing is trying to catalyze those people and encourage them to get into groups. And there's been plenty of people that have worked on that. I think it's the future. I think it's the thing that's going to drive. That's why I encourage people to kind of think in those ways, because Dawn Dixon, she tried to raise, we invested in her a couple of times, but she tried to raise venture funding, and she was working and working and working, and she just, on paper, it just wasn't working for people. They just couldn't get behind her. So she said, okay, F this, I'm out. And she went and she raised $1 million in crowd equity funding. At the time, the most of any Black woman, which is ridiculous, but also awesome. And she said, I'm just gonna make it happen. So now she has 2,000 or so angel investors who she can school and talk to and teach about things when it comes to that. And I think that if you have several of her, you have like the most fun you could possibly think about. Yeah. Thank you for listening to the podcast.
Thanks for joining. I wanted to know, my name's Will.
Hey, Will.
I wanted to know about maybe a time where you failed as an investor, why you think you failed, and what you learned about it going forward.
What would you consider failing?
An investment you made that didn't pan out, an opportunity passed that you think you should have jumped on.
Yeah, I don't. So far, there has not been something that I wanted to invest in. Let me put it this way: anything that has passed us by, quote unquote, has been because we couldn't afford it. So I don't think of it as a failure because I wanted to get in it. So I've seen sort of like things take off that we're not in, but I like applaud it from the sidelines because we just didn't have the capital to get in. And a lot of times that happens, and then we end up getting in later. There haven't been anywhere I made the. I think there's like, if I think of one that I made the investment and I regret making the investment, that might exist. And now people are going to wonder who that is, but don't try. That happened. It was just sort of. It was me sort of early on, not having developed enough discipline and enough of a red flag meter, which I find I have a much better hold on today. And it turned into like a toxic kind of relationship. Other than that, though, that's been an outlier. Other than that, I think all boats rise with the tide in this case. And so every time I see somebody doing well, it just makes me like say, look, I was right. I was right. We're doing it. It doesn't matter if we're in or not. But I think, come talk to me in 5 years. There may be something that I totally missed. And I missed it because, they said the wrong thing to me, or they caught me at the wrong time. And then they end up, doing really well. Not a great answer, but that's where we are right now. Thanks for asking.
Hi, my name's Juliana. Thank you for being here. My question is around how you selected your team members. So when you first started Backstage Capital, what were the skills you were looking for, the experiences? And that comes from a place of being interested in VC but not coming from an investing background. Mm-hmm. So how can you still complement a team if you don't have that investing experience?
So I was going to say something snarky about The Office, but we won't. But no, so all of the team members, thanks for asking the question. All the team members we've had many, and now we have a smaller team, and it kind of ebbs and flows. But everybody really was inbound, and that was helpful because it let me know they wanted to be there. First of all, it was like I found like they were most likely, we were high on the list of where they wanted to work, which was helpful. Just because I take it so seriously, someone spending their time, like their lives with us. To me, that's like an incredible honor and responsibility that someone wants to spend their waking hours, work hours with us. And so if they want to be there, that's a good start. I rarely know what school you went to, although I mention, once I know it, I mention it more often than I should for some reason. I'm really proud of you for being coming from a cool school, but if you didn't come from a cool school, I'm still, it's okay. So we have such a wide array of people that work at Backstage or have worked at Backstage. You have everyone from, not everyone from, you have just all types of people, all types of backgrounds. And I think people who kind of stand out to me are the ones who, like Chacho actually is a great story. You should talk to him if you get a chance to, where he's a great example of my phrase, being hungry, not thirsty. Where he would kind of send me a cool tweet every once in a while, let himself be known. Give me, like, if I asked a question, he would go Google it and have the answer for me just on a silver platter. And that was something I started recognizing. And then, and it wasn't like, coming at me like crazy, but he let me know he wanted to be in venture. He let me know that was something that was interesting to him. And I think people who take initiative, that's the number one thing. And people, of course, I'm pattern matching just like anybody else. I'm pattern matching for myself. And what I don't want people to do is break boundaries. Like, don't break personal boundaries. But I also like people who just go the extra mile and have a whole thesis. I think the common thread, if that's too ambiguous, is if you look at every single person at our fund that works there, they each could have their own fund and manage their own fund. So there's a brand around them. There's like a whole person. There's a whole thing there where they could do that on their own 2 feet.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Hi.
Hi, I'm Grace. Thank you so much for speaking with us. So I remember hearing about your conversation with Guy Raz on the startup podcast, or
no, it's a startup podcast, but it was not. I don't
okay,
think it was,
start on the startup podcast.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something about how founders coming from diverse backgrounds, they have more hustle and they're able to make more use of their resources. They can go an extra mile for having even less funds.
Yes.
Do you have an example of that after starting and something that really inspired you and was I was totally right?
Me. That's one. What it comes from, there's hundreds and thousands of examples because we see them every day. But the overall, one that happens a lot is where you'll have, if I think of a hardware company, there's a woman I'm thinking of right now who has a hardware company, and I think she had a total of maybe $300,000 she raised, and in the grand scheme of things, that's not that much. Even though it's a ton, it's not that much. And she had people who had raised $10, $20, $30 million asking her how she was able to learn everything she learned about supply chain. About supply chain. How did she get the products out so efficiently and so quickly? How did she know how to talk to the vendors? She had people she was a fraction backed as they were, and they were looking to her for help. And that's a real thing that happened, and it kind of happens over and over and over again. So my point on the podcast was, if someone could do so much with so little, imagine what would happen if we gave them more. That's the thesis of Backstage Capital.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
I'm going to take the prerogative to ask the last question, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah.
So you've told us, I'm going to use the word social justice. You've told us that you think angel investing is powerful career path towards social justice, or at least is a career path that you can make inroads. Would you have any other thoughts, right? Entrepreneurship, surely, in certain realms, right?
Oh, yeah.
Being in big corporate America, taking on the powers, being in the innovative ecosystem, where do we need to go, right?
We need to be where we want to be. You know what I'm saying? Like, we need to be. So my personal track is going to be shaking things up indie. I'm always going to be that indie person. I've worked since I was 15. I am a terrible employee, and I just am, and that doesn't really work for me. So I have my lane, and my lane is stacked. I have to tell you, like, you know, I do multiple things in the same lane, but that's my lane. I also think that, it's what Christy said on the phone a couple of days ago. She said we have to divide and conquer. We have to divide and conquer. She's talking about something else, but we have to divide and conquer. We have to, the number one thing is, I think you should, like, have a word with yourself, because only you can hear it, or you and your higher power can hear it. Have a word with yourself and say, what do I want? Not what do I think I should do, like, based on these other things, or what people want me to do, or what do I want to do? What would make me happy, do I think? Know that you can change and pivot and change your mind at any point. And then once you know that, be the best at that. And for a lot of people, that's going to be starting their own companies and kind of charting their own course there, knowing that it comes with a lot of ups and downs. It's not for the faint of heart. Only do it if you can't think of anything else that you want to do. I mean, it is really difficult, and it doesn't matter who you are. To your point, it does not matter who you are. It is a difficult undertaking, and if you have some sort of underrepresentation, which I guess we all do at some point, it stacks those odds for you. But you can do it, and you're going to, 5 years from now, like, it's going to be a whole different conversation. It's just going to be, because of the work that's being done today, just like 5 years ago, the work that was done 5 years, or the work that was done before I even knew what venture capital was, has helped me hit an inflection point. And then, yeah, like corporate stuff, like I've always said, I'm not here to fix Facebook. I'm not here, I don't have a reverence to these Silicon Valley heroes and idols. It's not my vibe. But you can learn a lot by working at a major company. And maybe you can change a lot about their culture. Maybe you can. And if that's what you want to do, I think you should do it with gusto, and then tweet at me about it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is great fun.